Point number 6. Now we will see what a radically different concept of justice arises from laws versus commands. In substantive law, the concept of justice is very clear. What is justice in the context of substantive law? What is just and what is unjust in the context of substantive law? Well, this is quite simple. Human behavior is described as either just or unjust, and human behavior which takes place within the framework of substantive law is just. And if someone violates substantive law, his action will be deemed an injustice. So, if I kill someone, that is unjust behavior, because I am violating an essential substantive law, one of those abstract general laws which apply equally to everyone, and take account of no particular circumstances. The same is true if I defraud, deceive, swindle, or rob someone, or if I commit any other assault on private property. So, justice consists of keeping our behavior within the framework of substantive rules. Remember that no specific content is prescribed. We all decide on that for ourselves, according to our own ends, those we value. Furthermore, justice is blind. That is why she is portrayed as a blindfolded goddess. The law applies equally to everyone, without taking any particular circumstance into account, and therefore the judge must not see anything concerning the parties in order to avoid being influenced by their particular circumstances. Rather, the judge must simply rule in an abstract and general manner. Listen, have you murdered someone? Well, then you are a murderer, and I do not care about any particular circumstance. Have you robbed someone? Well, the same is true. In the Bible, in the book of Leviticus, we read, "You shall not render an unjust judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor, the greater danger, or defer to the great. With justice you shall judge your neighbor." And justice has her eyes covered, so that she will not see any particular circumstance. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great. Of course. Here, judge, have a few million, and please rule in my favor. Or, boo-hoo, they are kicking me out. I am not paying the rent, but they are turning me out on the street, and I will be living on the street with 14 children. Oh, you poor thing. I feel so sorry for you. Well, even though you have broken the law and are not paying the rent, you may stay in the house. That is a terrible injustice. Particular circumstances do not matter, and thus if you violate the law, the abstract framework of substantive rules, you are committing an injustice. Note how clear the concept of justice is. In the context of substantive law, justice hinges on whether or not one's behavior stays within those rules. In addition, justice is blind to any specific circumstance, because we are all equal before substantive law. Meanwhile, in the sphere of commands, the concept of justice is radically different, though the same term is used. There is a profound corruption and prostitution of the concept of justice. Justice, in the traditional sense, is corrupted and prostituted in what is known as social justice. Take note. Whenever a qualifier is added to a term, the term is corrupted. Hayek referred to such qualifiers as weasel words, because we are constantly being manipulated, and many words have a strong social appeal. These are given qualifiers so that we will take the bait, and without realizing it, we will be manipulated and go in the direction desired by those who wish to coerce us. Thus, people talk about popular democracy. Well, a popular democracy is the exact opposite of a democracy, and they talk about a social constitutional state. Listen, a state is either constitutional or it is not, but why add the word social? And we hear of organic democracy. Organic? What does this mean? Does it have to do with organs? Franco's system was called organic democracy. It was not democracy. And then there is social justice. Look, either it is justice or it is not justice, but do not add the qualifier social. The moment social is added, the concept of justice is completely prostituted. It no longer has anything to do with the concept we have just discussed. I repeat, according to the traditional concept, justice hinges on whether or not our behavior stays within the framework of substantive rules. Furthermore, justice is blind, She must not allow herself to be influenced by particular circumstances. She must not be partial to the poor, nor defer to the great. In contrast, what is social justice? Well, social justice is the concept of justice which emerges in the sphere of commands. It is the more or less emotional impression the judge forms of the result of the social process at a specific time. I halt the social process, and in an instant I take a photo, and I look at it and say, "Oh, I do not like what I see. There are a few very wealthy multimillionaires here, and many poor people. Social injustice. I do not like it." Obviously, the just thing to do is to take from the rich and give to the poor, is it not? And everyone says, of course, especially if people are sold the idea that they are among those who will come out ahead in net terms, because they consider themselves poor. Let others pay, and let the money be given to me. Of course, social justice. Take note. What before was traditional justice now becomes pure arbitrariness, which, according to whim or privilege, justifies the greatest injustices conceivable from the traditional viewpoint. For when I judge that I do not like what I see, and that we must take from some people to give to others, because there is inequality and social injustice, what am I justifying? Violence, robbery, coercion. That is, the most unjust behaviors imaginable. With the concept of social justice, all that matters is the impression I get of what I see, regardless of how the human beings involved have behaved in the process. I see there are a few wealthy people and many poor people. I say social injustice. Let us take from some and give to others. Well, just a minute. Should we not analyze whether these people who have a lot have behaved correctly from the perspective of substantive law? If they have a lot and have not robbed or murdered anyone, and they have respected the property of others, and they have honored their contracts, their behavior has been fundamentally just. And what you are doing now is, in a corrupt and prostituted manner, justifying violence and coercion, which are precisely the most unjust behaviors conceivable. The concept of justice is corrupted. New concepts are invented, like the notion of social sin. Listen, I have behaved very well. I have kept all of the commandments. I have been good, etc. No, you are part of a social sin. What? Yes, structures of social injustice exist. How can there be structures of social injustice? What are they? And who decides? What is more, the prostituted, corrupted concept of social justice is the biggest trap you can imagine. If a judge stops basing decisions on objective, substantive law and begins basing them on impressions, all legal certainty and the entire concept of justice disappear. Whether you win or lose a lawsuit will depend more on how you manage to impress the judge, rather than on good or bad behavior, from the perspective of objective, substantive laws. A skillful lawyer will be one who says, "This poor woman, look at the condition she is in." And the poor lady will be there coughing and dressed in rags. They are going to turn her out on the street with 6 children. It is true that she is not paying the rent, but she is in a terrible situation. Now, look at the owner of the property. Look at him. He has a pot belly, a snout like a pig, and a gold watch. He is a millionaire. What difference does it make to him if he is not paid? And the judge will say, "You are right. There is a grave social injustice here. You may stay in the house, ma'am, even without paying." And the lady leaves the courthouse delighted. She walks out of the courthouse, and do you know what happens next? She takes off her ragged coat, puts on a mink coat, and climbs into a Mercedes. Could that happen? Maybe so, maybe not. But my point is that there is complete arbitrariness. If you do not believe me, consider juries. There the problem is even worse. In other words, if you would like there to be some justice in the future, in case you are ever tried, let us hope you never face a jury trial. When there is a jury, what do lawyers do? Do they focus all of their skill on finding out whether, from the standpoint of substantive laws, the behavior of the defendant has actually been bad? No. What they seek to do is to impress the jury. And how do they do that? Well, with social justice arguments. The accused is then doomed. In an environment of commands, an end is pursued, and it has been chosen by the authority in power. Justice or injustice depends on how consistent a situation is with that end which the authority wishes to impose from above, regardless of whether or not participants in the social process have kept their behavior within the law in the substantive sense. The concept of justice is thoroughly prostituted, and the most unjust behaviors conceivable are legitimized, violently taking from some people to give to others, while disregarding whether or not the abstract general rules of substantive law have been complied with. Social justice removes the goddess's blindfold and gives her some rose or blue-colored glasses in order to see what impression she forms of what she sees, and to determine, based on that, ad hoc, and depending on the circumstances of the case to be decided, what she thinks is best. Thus, all legal certainty and all traditional justice disappear. The key to a successful trial outcome no longer consists of being legally right, but rather of making a favorable impression on the judge or jurors. As a result, more and more lawsuits are filed, because everything depends on the luck of the draw. So, maybe, if we are lucky, consequently, judges have an excessive workload. Their rulings are more and more imperfect, and so on, in a gradual breakdown of justice, which unfortunately we are witnessing at very close range. And that prostitution of justice becomes increasingly entrenched as the influence of commands increases and the influence of substantive laws decreases.